There are many photographers out there who have claimed to have caught a ghost on camera, and if you were to do a quick Google search, you will find a great quantity of so-called real ghostly phantoms that have been captured for all to see. And as we all know, the majority of these photographs look fake or manipulated in some way, especially in the modern day when all you need is a camera, a PC, and Photoshop. I mean, I could even produce a fake photograph of a ghost in a matter of minutes just using my mobile phone. It may look convincing, but it would easily be proven fake. But way back in the 1800s, when photography was quite new, it was harder to debunk the fake photographs. For example, way back in the early 1860s, an American gentleman named William Mumler became very famous after snapping a picture of the spirit of his dead cousin, and later other family members. Like I said, in those days debunking a ghostly photograph was a harder task than it was today, and so Mumler, who was most definitely a con man may I add, went on to make a not so honest living out of ghost photography. Each photograph would sell for between $5 to $10, which in those days was a substantial amount of money. And business was good for Mumler due to the large amount of grieving people who had just lost relatives in the American Civil War, who wished to have one last photograph with the spirit of their loved ones. One of his most famous photographs see a lady sat in a chair with the spirit of her late husband stood behind her with his hands placed on her shoulders. The lady was named Mary Todd Lincoln, and her husband was none other than Abraham Lincoln, the President of the United States. Mumler produced many more photographs and business was good, but it wasn't long before someone discovered that his photos may not be as legit as he made out. When a lady asked for a photograph of a deceased brother who had been lost in the Civil War, and Mumler of course obliged, and provided her with a ghostly image of her dear brother. And it was accepted by the lady, who was delighted to have a photograph. That is until her brother returned home, safe and sound from the Civil War. But amazingly, instead of accusing Mumler of fraud, she instead believed without a shadow of a doubt that the photo of her deceased brother was in fact a demon that had taken on his form. Mumler didn't only take photos of spirits, he also took portraits of actual people who were alive and well, and he would sometimes use the negatives of these people to pose as ghosts. And eventually, his luck ran out when a gentleman recognised his own wife, who had paid for her portrait done previously, and was now in one of Mumler's spirit pictures, but she was indeed alive and well. Mumler was eventually taken to court and was tried for fraud, but for some reason he was acquitted and set free to carry on developing his fake spirit photographs and fool even more people. People just simply wanted or needed to believe. That being said, are all pictures taken of supposed ghosts fakes? Is it possible that there is a photograph out there that has indeed captured a ghost? Well, maybe. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at the famous picture of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall, which many believe is the best evidence of a so-called real ghost ever caught by camera, and possibly the most famous. And we're also going to look into the sightings of the Brown Lady that have occurred over the years. So without further ado, I give you the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. On the 19th of September 1936, Captain Hubert C. Provand and his assistant Indre Shearer, photographers from Country Life magazine, paid a visit to Raynham Hall to take some pictures for the main feature of the magazine. Now, one of the most eye-catching areas of the property was a beautiful grand staircase, and as they set up the camera and proceeded to shoot the stairs, Shearer noticed a strange vapour materialising out of thin air, and to his amazement it formed the shape of a woman in a flowing dress, making her way down the staircase. Provand didn't actually see the apparition as he was beneath the black sheet of the camera setting up the next shot, and so at this point the camera was ready to take the shot, and as Shearer stood there in disbelief watching the misty phantom make its way down the staircase, he shouted out to Provand to take the shot. The trigger was pressed and the flash went off, and the ghostly apparition disappeared. Of course, they never in a million years thought that the apparition would have made it into one of their photographs. In fact, Provand disbelieved that there was a ghost at all, let alone that it was captured. So Shearer made his friend a bet. If there was a ghost on the image, he would expect £5. If there wasn't, Provand would be £5 richer. And during the development under the eye of a Mr. Benjamin Jones, who they called as a witness, they were delighted to discover that they had indeed caught the ghost of the Brown Lady in the photograph, and Shearer took his winnings of £5 from Provand. And on December the 26th, the photos of the hall and the ghost upon the stairway were published in Country Life magazine, and in January the photo made its way into the pages of Life magazine, which placed the photograph in front of so many other people, and went on to become one of the most believable photographs of a ghost caught on camera to have been taken, and it's gone on to be featured in many paranormal books throughout the years. But what gave this photograph even more credence is the ghost stories that surrounded it. Sightings of the Brown Lady. Sightings that went back as far as 1835. But before we get into those sightings, let's first explore the identity of the Brown Lady. According to legend, the true identity of the Brown Lady was a woman named Dorothy Walpole, who lived between 1686 and 1726, and became Dorothy Townsend when she wed Charles Townsend, who was born at Raynham Hall in Norfolk, and he was a very important man who had the role of Secretary of State for the Northern Department in the UK. He was also a baron and then later became a viscount. But it was said that he wasn't a very kind man and he was very quick to anger, and whatever love he and Dorothy had for each other was not to last, and she quickly fell into the arms of another man, a married man, an English nobleman and politician named Thomas Wharton. But eventually their secret love affair did come to an end, and here is where our story seems to split off into two possible scenarios, and both didn't end well for Dorothy. One version of the story says that Dorothy's husband found out about the affair, and as punishment he locked Dorothy into her chambers, telling everyone that she had died, and there she stayed until her actual death in 1726 when she contracted smallpox and died. Another version says that Thomas Wharton's wife found out about the affair, and she was the one who held Dorothy prisoner until her death, keeping her locked up for many years, not even allowing her to see her own children. Over 100 years would pass before the first documented sighting of Dorothy's ghosts at Raynham Hall would take place. The ghost of Dorothy first made herself seen way back in December of 1835 during a Christmas party that was being held at Raynham Hall. Colonel Loftus was one of the many guests that night who had been invited to enjoy the festivities of the Christmas period, and after a night of making himself rather merry, he decided it was time for bed. On his way up to his room, accompanied by another gentleman who was also making his way to his bedroom, both men noticed a woman in a brown dress, standing beside the doorway of Colonel Loftus' bedroom, with her back turned, and as they approached, the lady simply vanished into thin air. The very next night, as Colonel Loftus made his way once more to his room, he saw the ghostly figure of the woman in brown stood near his bedroom door. But this time, he was determined to see who the woman was, and he dashed over to try and get a look at the strange apparition. He later told that as he drew near, his attention was drawn to her face, and horrifically the woman's eyes were missing, and in their place there were deep dark voids, and her skin seemed to give off an eerie glow. It is said that after Loftus made it known that he had indeed seen a ghost, some members of staff who were working at Raynham Hall walked out and never returned. The next person to see the Brown Lady was actually a good friend of Charles Dickens and a fellow author himself, as well as a Royal Navy officer named Frederick Marryat. Marryat had heard about the haunting at Raynham Hall and wished to debunk the sightings that had took place. Marryat believed that there was no ghost at all, and it was a clever prank made by smugglers in the area who wished to scare people away. And so when he arrived at Raynham Hall in 1836, he requested that he be given the most haunted room on the property, and so they gave him the room where the ghost had often been seen by staff. As he entered the room, he noticed a picture hung upon the wall of a young lady, which was a portrait of Lady Dorothy Walpole, how she had looked in life. For 2 nights, Marryat slept with his pistol tucked under his pillow, at hand whenever he may need it, whilst the eyes of the portrait looked on. And for 2 nights, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. But on the 3rd night, Marryat would see something that would change his mind on the existence of ghosts forever. The following is an excerpt taken from the book There Is No Death, which was written by Florence Marryat, Frederick Marryat's daughter, and published in 1917. In the book, she wrote the following about her father's strange experience that night. He took possession of the room in which the portrait of the apparition hung, and in which she had been often seen, and slept each night with a loaded revolver under his pillow. For 2 days, however, he saw nothing, and the 3rd was to be the limit of his stay. On the 3rd night, however, 2 young men, nephews of the baronet, knocked at his door as he was undressing to go to bed and asked him to step over to their room, which was on the other end of the corridor, and give them his opinion on a new gun that just arrived from London. My father was in his shirt and trousers, but as the hour was late and everybody had retired to rest except themselves, he prepared to accompany them, as he was. As they were leaving the room, he caught up his revolver. "In case you meet the Brown Lady," he said, laughing. When the inspection of the gun was over, the young men in same spirit declared that they would accompany my father back again, in case you meet the brown lady, they repeated, laughing also. The three gentlemen therefore returned in company. The corridor was long and dark, for the lights had been extinguished, but as he reached the middle of it, they saw the glimmer of a lamp coming towards them from the other end. One of the ladies going to visit the nurseries, whispered the young Townsends to my father. Now, the bedroom doors in the corridor faced each other, and each room had a double door with a space between, as is the case with many old-fashioned houses. My father, as I have said, was in shirt and trousers only, and his native modesty made him feel uncomfortable, so he slipped within one of the outer doors, his friends following his example, in order to conceal himself until the lady should have passed by. I've heard him describe how he watched her approaching nearer and nearer through the chink of the door, until as she was close enough for him to distinguish the colours and style of her costume, he recognised the figure as a facsimile of the portrait of the brown lady. He had his finger on the trigger of his revolver and was about to demand it to stop and give the reason for its presence there, when the figure halted of its own accord before the door behind which he stood, and holding the lighted lamp she carried to her features, grinned in a malicious and diabolical manner at him. This act so infuriated my father, who was anything but lamb-like in disposition, that he sprang into the corridor with a bound and discharged the revolver right in her face. The figure instantly disappeared, the figure at which for several minutes three men had been looking together, and the bullet passed through the outer door of the room on the opposite side of the corridor and lodged into the panel of the inner one. My father never attempted again to interfere with the brown lady of Raynham. The ghostly sightings thereafter were very few and far between until September of 1936, where we started this story, when the two photographers from Country Life magazine managed to snap the ghostly image of the brown lady gliding down the grand staircase. Of course, over the years the photograph has been under suspicion. Some say the image of the brown lady is just a blob of grease that was placed upon the lens and made to resemble the shape of a woman, or it was simply a double exposure on the film. Some have even said that the ghost looks a lot like the statue of the Virgin Mary that could have been manipulated and superimposed onto the photograph of the staircase. However, not long after the picture was taken, a gentleman named Harry Price, who was a paranormal researcher who made it his duty to export fraudulent spiritualists, examined the photo himself, and he also examined the two men who claimed to have taken the picture of the ghost. Harry Price came to the conclusion that the two men were telling the truth and the negative was free from faking. So what do you think? Is a photograph of the brown lady that was taken way back in 1936 an actual photograph of a ghost? And is it possible that the spirit of the brown lady haunts the floors of Raynham Hall to this very day? As always, I'll let you decide. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you very, very soon.